Today we have Bryan Clark from GitHub with us. Welcome to Recess, Bryan.
Hey. Hi.
You unmuted yourself. So,
Meeting.
so Bryan is currently the Director of Product at GitHub, and previously he was a PM at Mozilla, as well as a designer at Red Hat. Bryan, let's get right into it. Can you introduce yourself and how you got involved with the product world?
Yeah, so I started with, I have a degree in computer science, because I just wanted to put the snooze button on life for a little while and go for that master's. And then from there, I became a designer because I really was focused on the human-computer kind of interactions that people have and how people perceive software. I did a lot of extra psych courses and things like that under how people perceive and understand their world. And so I just kind of dove into that, and that's what I did at Red Hat and into Mozilla. I was a designer and then became a design manager. And at some point, I think a lot of designers experience this where you want to get ahead of the curve like that. Often you end up designing things where most of the decisions have already been made. That something has been built by engineers and then they want it to work nice and make it usable and things like that. And I was tired of feeling that way. And that's when Mozilla was really kind of building out their product org. So I took the opportunity to kind of make the leap from even doing management and design and went into product. And I started, kind of at the bottom and worked my way back up in Mozilla, doing various product management for Firefox. Also really trying to figure it out because, and I give a talk to about this at a local product group here in Victoria, how there's no school of product management, right? There's just as designers, there's design schools, right? There's excellent schools out there like RISD and other things. Engineering, same thing. Computer science is kind of in that waffly area of software engineering where they're figuring out how to have structure, but yeah, there's no process or anything like that. So I remember really struggling as a product manager of I'm using a design process, but no one else is. Everyone else is doing their own thing. And how do we figure that out? It's kind of a community thing right now, which I think is really, really interesting.
Yeah. So with your fancy computer degrees, how good are you at fixing your family's computers?
I'm the worst. I'm definitely the worst. Oh man, yeah. Everyone asks, my uncle will repeatedly email me in all caps with some problem with Windows and stuff like that. And I haven't used Windows in a long time, which also becomes difficult now that GitHub is owned by Microsoft and everybody also has Windows. So there's various problems I just can't solve. I know how to build tools. I'm very handy, and so I'm really great building things, working with tools, building developer tools. But man, I can't fix computers, especially Windows. I'm pretty good on Macs. I understand the Macs world. From Red Hat. I did a lot of Linux. I can work in terminals and stuff like that. I'm still kind of a developer, but yeah, I don't know. I'm awful with that stuff.
Can you give us a high-level overview of what GitHub does, because some people may not know, and how your role fits into the organization?
Yeah. So GitHub at the most basic level, GitHub works kind of like a Google Docs for developers, right? Developers need a place to coordinate and communicate and share their work with others. So, I mean, what my day is mostly in Google Docs, and that's where I develop product strategies and other things, and I share that work with others, and people comment on it and edit it, and then we deliver those docs or presentations to others in order to kind of communicate. And GitHub does that for code. So software code needs to be stored in one place and organized in a way. And because computers are so finicky about being right or wrong, code really needs to be reviewed and evaluated before it goes into production. And so GitHub kind of addresses all these concerns by hosting all the code and helping developers through kind of the communication process, as well as it has facilities for issues when you need to file issues for bugs and features and things like that to track software. And all the way into now GitHub offers solutions for continuous integration through our GitHub Actions, and as well as shipping software out for GitHub packages. I am the director of product. I lead up the GitHub packages team at GitHub, and packages is about how you group like software that you want to ship into like a logical organization kind of thing. It's like when you want to send out like a Google Doc or something like that, you have to decide, is it going to be like a Word doc or a PDF or something like that? It's almost similar to like packaging and software. Is like you have to figure out how others are going to consume it, what's the right way for that to work. And so we offer services like that for people to publish, and then other consumers to have the best offering for consuming and updating and doing all those kind of activities related to software.
Yeah. I see that your t-shirt, is that the GitHub logo?
It is, yeah. It's very what is that, like Carnegie style? Like I feel very like a company person. Like GitHub gives you all this swag. I think I could live every day for a month on just GitHub t-shirts, sweatshirts. Like I have a sweatshirt here as well. It's like a GitHub sweatshirt. I have many sweatshirts over the years for things. Like I don't need to dress in other clothes, but I do feel weird going out. Like sometimes, like I think it's this one. Yeah, this t-shirt or this sweatshirt has my GitHub username on it. They like
Oh,
when you join GitHub, this is part of like the cult
yeah.
of joining GitHub, which is pretty cool. Everyone gets very excited about it.
So those,
You get a
yeah,
nice sweatshirt, yeah, with your username on the side, and you walk around town like that sometimes. And I have Clark PW on the side of my shirt. Every now
those
and then,
that
people ask.
know, yeah,
Yeah,
those that know what it means.
yeah, oh yeah.
Um, so you mentioned that you're the product director. What does your product team look like?
Well, so GitHub has its own product org, right? We set like the kind of structure we have is there's an engineering org, which is by far the largest organization at GitHub. Alongside that is product, where we also house like docs, marketing, and other groups related to kind of product activities. And then my team, we reside in what we call Code to Cloud, which is like my larger organization, which is alongside Actions. And so there's kind of like a whole group of Actions, a much larger group, because Actions is a much like larger product than packages of product managers there. I have two reports now for packages team who do various pieces on packages. So we have one product manager who focuses solely on NPM. GitHub acquired NPM this year. That's a JavaScript package management system. And then another product manager who's focusing on the kind of core packaging offering. And I do a lot of the kind of customer interactions, strategy and planning for packages and the code to cloud and action side of things. And we are very new. When I joined GitHub almost 3 years ago, there was no product team. Like group of us had to like create a product group, like an org from nothing, figure out the process. There were some product managers kind of scattered within GitHub, but it's all fairly new for GitHub. But we've been getting a lot of kind of Microsoft product managers and others to help it out. So I think going from 0 product managers in 3 years to, I feel like we're at 150 product managers now.
Yeah.
It's a huge change, right? They have like a lot of like adapting to like a new organizational structure.
I can't imagine having a product company with no product managers. That seems so, you know, not within the box. I guess people work very independently then.
Yeah, I mean, GitHub has had, they've had product managers over the years. They had this kind of ebb and flow.
Mhm.
And I talk a lot about this in terms of like, they've experienced all types of product managers. So they've experienced the CEO types, right? Where like they own everything and like product specs are delivered and engineering must comply. And that generally, in my mind, creates like poor relationships within the organization. And then they also like, so then that product group kind of dissipated. And then they had the product managers who are like the ideas, like product managers, like they go on a walkabout, They like have like these ideas at offsites and they come back and like we rip up the roadmap and we just do all these new things because
Mhm.
those things seem really cool and they're like kind of following market trends or something like that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, when we came in, you know, at first I think when you're joining a group that doesn't have product management as a product manager, you're really worried that like the antibodies will reject you in the system, right? That the engineers will revolt. And so you have to really work hard to build relationships and try and figure out your place. But really, everybody wants, all the engineers and everyone else, like they don't want extra process, but they do want some structure and some stability and like a roadmap that they can follow and like trust that it won't shake up. Like they experience many times just like, you know, working on things for months to then not ship because it finally got to somebody who said, no, we're not doing that. We can't ship that. I mean, I think, you know, GitHub had like a Slack competitor for a little while, like an internal Slack application, right? That um, finally someone said, we can't do that. Like that's not part of our core structure.
Right.
But luckily, yeah, GitHub, because, and a lot of dev tools organizations, I think, experience this. They're built by developers, so developers feel like they understand their audience and they don't like, maybe they don't need that much. But GitHub has always had a really great design organization by like Mark and others who have been here for a long time. So design has always been like a core part of GitHub's like kind of philosophy and delivery. And so I think, yeah, they were able to like kind of skate by on this, like, I'm a developer, so I understand the customer, even though that like it doesn't always translate because they missed a lot of the enterprise business because they were developers and they understood developers, but not purchasers and everybody
Yes.
else involved in the process.
Yeah.
Um, but they have, you know, like great designers and great engineers. So really just went by on like pure muscle.
You started out in development and then designing. How has your development background helped or hindered you in your current role? Because I know in our pre-interview we mentioned that it can be an Achilles heel because you sometimes think you know more about, you know, the actual topic, and we thought this was a great point, maybe something you could talk about.
Yeah, it's love to talk about this. I get this question a lot when I give talks, and I definitely don't use my computer science degree much anymore. It is a thing where like a muscle that you need to maintain, right? Like I don't go to the programming gym like other people do in order to keep that going. So I can't keep up. I mean, I have like at this point it's like classical knowledge of computer science. Like I understand the algorithms still. I understand how databases work. Fundamentally, a lot of these things didn't change, and so like I'm really glad that I do have that kind of like classical computer science background in a lot of ways. But yeah, there's a definite duality to that. Like many times, especially like when I mentor or work with young new product managers, they'll ask like, should I go do computer science courses? Should I learn these things? And the motivation sometimes is like that they'll be able to call bullshit on developers. And like right away, I tell them like, that's the recipe for a terrible relationship with your engineering like team, is that like if you're there to call bullshit on them, then you have like organizational structural problems. Like your engineers, you should like trust by default that they're doing the right thing and that they're the best people for that job, right? And if they're not, then like, you know, you should be working within the organization to figure out like how can we get a better team or a better structure or like education so that we can all like level up. um, so I never do that. I do try to write code sometimes, and the engineers do think it's laughable, even though I think my code is still pretty spot on, especially in JavaScript. But Mostly, yeah, like it helps me. It helps me like build out quick relationships because
Mm.
I can talk tech, and so when I join a new team, I like kind of understand the technology. I don't make a lot of mistakes that make engineers really suspicious, right? I make complicated mistakes later on by assuming I really understand things. But
Okay.
when it comes down to like how Kubernetes works, like I don't really know anymore. Like I just it's, you know, super complicated things that I haven't spent a lot of time. And when I was at, I'm supposed to say university, right? Like I'm a dual American Canadian, so I always try to keep with the Canadian shtick. When I was in school in university, I just had extra time to like try things, and like I had like um, I had built up we had a lab for open source, and we had like a Beowulf cluster and all these things. And I remember like, you know, you learn these you try these things and you learn them, and like that stuff is excellent for later on when you're in the working environment because you had spent this time learning new tech and other stuff. But I don't have my own Kubernetes cluster at home anymore. Like
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. I just like, if I did, I would probably, you know, that would really help me with my job, but I don't have time for that kind of thing anymore. And I just, yeah, I learned to trust what my engineers are telling me to do. And it is hard to let go of that a little bit, but it's better to build out this relationship.
Right. And so you use the term relationship, and I've spoken to a lot of PMs who also say, you know, I like to cultivate a good relationship with the engineers. I would like them to respect me as a PM, and even if they are non very technical. How do you cultivate this relationship, especially if you are a very non-technical PM?
Yeah. Um, well, I think, yeah, that's a really good question. So I think because I have like a technical background, I get that kind of cheat where I can talk tech with engineers right away, and they feel like I'm not going to um, overstate things that can be done, or you know, like just kind of misstep on the technical bounds of things. Without that, I think it is a lot about like just like, yeah, like a building out regular relationships, really trying to trust by default that like they're doing their best, and over communicating like what your goals are and what the customer goals are and like the things you're trying to accomplish. And you know, like spending time with people and like you know, in just a regular sense of like, which in this actually I should call out, is something I don't do as much now as I should. Like this is something where I'm definitely faltering on. We have so many new engineers on the team right now, of late, that I haven't met all of them. Like we had a recent like group Zoom, because we use Zoom for everything, and I saw all these faces there. I was like, wow, I haven't had any one-on-one time with any
You
of them.
haven't signed their swag? Haven't
Yep.
sent them any personalized cards? So moving
Oh,
on, GitHub has like 40 million developers using your tool. What are some challenges of building a product for such a large user base? And you sort of touched upon enterprise clients as well. How have you worked through these challenges?
yeah, I mean, they're again, it's like it's a great double-edged sword, right? So in my career, originally I started at Red Hat. I left Red Hat in part because it was focused solely on the enterprise. And the thing I didn't like about the enterprise market is that the buyers, the people who purchase enterprise software, are not the users. And so you
Yeah.
have this like weird thing where you do a lot of work to entice the management and the people who want to enact policies, to buy the software. A lot of those policies are maybe like probably detrimental to the use of the software, like for the actual consumers. So I went to Mozilla because you know, I was like, I want to go to a place where it's consumer technology. I want people to choose this, right? Because that like that foot traffic model gives you a great like barometer on like whether people like the software and use it. Um, and I'd always wanted to work for GitHub, and I think GitHub has this real duality of enterprise and consumer, right? So on github.com, and actually we get, just like Firefox in a lot of ways, we get this question where people are like, how do you make money? I don't get it. Like GitHub just gives away everything. And you know, like the answer is like, well, yeah, we give away a lot of stuff, right? Like open source and free users get almost all of the GitHub features to a certain extent. But we also sell an enterprise version of GitHub, several different flavors, right? So there is a enterprise like price SKU on GitHub where you can do enterprise, what we call enterprise cloud, which is you just get all the features. We run it hosted environment, and that gets you like all this extra security scanning, minutes for CI and things like that. And then a bunch of different like on-prem GitHub and stuff like that. Um, yeah, enterprise customers, they want controls, they want policies and all these other things. Those things would really weigh down the average GitHub user when you're looking at like, yeah, if you say like the 40 million number, most of those people are individual developers who, or maybe work on teams, small projects. And then there's also this kind of funnel, or maybe it's like pyramid aspect to our users, which we tend to relate a lot to like YouTube or something, right? So in YouTube, you have these like creators, which YouTube, I think, does a great job of treating their creators like very differently than everybody else, right? There's a totally different interface for YouTube creators and uploaders. There's even different YouTube apps for uploading. And then on the consumer side, as like a YouTube consumer, I'm not a YouTube creator, I'm not hip like that. But like on the consumer side, when you just go to YouTube, you have a very different experience than the creators do. You're just kind of like, you're in their machine learning like system, right? Like watching videos and they're like suggesting different ones based on those attributes. So we have that with software developers, right? We have these open source maintainers who spend a majority of their day on GitHub interacting with our software in a way that like those 40 million people are not doing, right? So like they are our creators, like they maintain software that runs everything, right? Like things that are like part of the Zoom call is like guaranteed, probably more than 50% of the code that built Zoom is open source software and it's on GitHub somewhere.
Right.
And those people, we listen to them in a very different way than everybody else. And we are attentive to them, but then at the same time, you have to balance that with like the things that they want aren't necessarily going to be good things for everybody else, right? Like they want more controls, they want more information about certain things that the rest of people who are pure, like at GitHub just to consume, which is the majority of users, aren't. And I know like pretty much every product has this kind of duality shape to it. And so you really have to figure out like how your process of like taking information in and prioritizing slots in that kind of stuff, like where you spend your time, because our enterprise clients, that's where we get all our money, right? So if I want to earn more money for our group, I need to do enterprise features so that I'll get more sales and do those things, or spend more time with like marketing to help market the stuff that we have, or onboard enterprise users more quickly. But none of those features translate to greater numbers of GitHub. That doesn't get me another 20 million GitHub users, right?
Yeah.
That's a totally different game.
So, Bryan, let's answer a question that kind of touches on that topic. What are your strategies for balancing tech debt versus new features?
Um, oh, well,
Death by a thousand paper cuts, we know, with tech debt.
yep. Yeah, this is always really difficult. I mean, I think we try to allot a certain amount of time for tech debt with every quarter, just assuming that it exists. Like it's, even the like phrase tech debt is like an interesting concept, like as if, I mean, maybe if you think about it in credit card debt or something like that, where it's like, I always have some kind of debt going on in my statement, right? Like every month, if I use my credit card, which I do, I'm just accruing debt and I need to pay it off every month. I think like some similar model is that you just like every new feature, every bug fix is putting towards that, like your statement where you're like, you're going to have to pay it down at some point. And especially, right, like on older software, which GitHub is over 10 years old now, right? So there's parts of the GitHub code base that haven't been touched in 10 years. And that's an eternity in the, like the software world, right? It's Ruby on Rails code. Some of it is like from Ruby 2. And Ruby on Rails is on like version 6, I think now, maybe 7. Way out there. And so, yeah, like I think it's a struggle in my group. We definitely try to allocate a lot of time for that. We work with support teams a lot and do like a lot of different activities to help support. And that usually identifies a lot of things where you just had like forgotten code. And then we use that as like, so let's say like support identifies something that's broken and customers are trying to use. We then try to funnel that back in to like, okay, let's take a little bit extra time to clean up where we are. You know, it's that like, yeah, I was like a scout when I was a kid, right? It's like leave things better than you left them kind of
Yes,
mentality.
I've written that in one of our pieces before about design debt, actually.
Yeah. It's a good thing. Yeah, it's not how you clear it all out, but it definitely like and you run into situations where people want to like if we just spent, maybe a couple like 2 more weeks, we could really make this nice. But I think you have to balance that against like where are we going, right? Like are we really going to spend a lot more time on that feature or that angle for customers? And if we are, if we're going to like build on that, then like yeah, maybe we should actually spend the time to make sure that part works really well, because if we're going to build on that as a foundation, then it should work well. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. But if it like if otherwise it just doesn't, it's not something that we're going to continue to invest in. Sometimes you just let things rot. Like
And
it,
tear it
nobody
down
ever
eventually.
nobody ever unships software. Like no, no,
Yeah, good
no one
point.
in my experience spends the time to be like, hey, we should really delete that code that we shipped that no one's using, right? Because like that takes away from time you could be doing other things, and maybe everyone should be doing that. And every place I've been is wrong, and that's very likely. But
That is
no,
Bryan Clark's hot take. Just let it rot.
just let it rot.
Just let it rot. Okay, Brian, last question as we wind down on this half hour. Somebody asked, they're currently working in a startup where priorities constantly change. How do you handle trying to plan ahead when it seems impossible? And I think that's really relevant in COVID times.
Yeah, I think that part is definitely hard. Like there's a bit of like this comes from leadership, right? Like priorities in the shorter sense should be rapidly changing, right? Like on a week to week basis, I have different support calls that come in, right? Where like large enterprise customer can't use this thing. It just doesn't work. And so we have to drop what we're doing and fix that so that they're unstuck, right? We have like a measure of figuring out like how much time we spend on every support issue. And it's essentially like if we can find a workaround, like we give our engineers half an hour, it's like find a workaround. You have half an hour when you assign yourself to a ticket. And if they can get that done and a workaround, then it just goes into our backlog. And so, but we are trying our best now to metric all this stuff so that we can relay. Oh, sorry, hold on, Cole. Just 1 minute more. It's work from home. I know. And so we're trying to metric all this stuff so we can better kind of communicate where time is spent, because that's also difficult. So then, yeah, you take all that and you're like, okay, on a week to week basis, priorities are always changing, but on the higher level basis, they shouldn't be. Like leadership should really have a sense, and I know this isn't always possible, but like your North Star shouldn't be shifting to the Southern Hemisphere
Mm,
very often, right? Like you should have some sense that's like, that is in general where we're going. And within that, things change. And I use a lot of analogies and I'm really sorry about this because they go on, but like, if you think about like when I used to plan like my family used to plan trips, like road trips, we would like go to AAA or something like that, and they would send like a bunch of paper maps. Like this is when I was a kid, and this is a long time ago. And like somebody would have like highlighted the paper map in like an actual highlighter for the whole road trip. Like the whole thing's planned out from end to end, and
yeah,
that was like really great. But they had no idea about construction, roads that were being like that were down for
yeah,
whatever reasons. There's no real timeness, right? So like that stuff isn't possible anymore. Like when I take a trip now, use Google Maps and like you have live updates and you adjust as you go. I don't know how I'm going to get through Seattle right now because I don't know what the traffic is by the time I get there. So like that
yeah,
stuff always changes like kind of as you get there, but your destination shouldn't change. I shouldn't be saying I'm trying to get to Portland, Oregon from Victoria, and then like halfway through Seattle I decide, oh actually we want to go to like Illinois. I want to be in Chicago. Like that shouldn't happen. That's on leader. Like that's a leadership thing that we need to like bubble up to be like we should know Portland versus Chicago from the very beginning. And at certain points, maybe like at Seattle, we decide we're going to part ways and we have to cut. But um, yeah,
set your mission and go for it.
yeah, and sometimes things do change and you have to change with them for sure. But it shouldn't happen that often.
Yeah. Okay, everyone, as we wind down on our session, I want to thank Bryan for being really generous with his time and being a guest on Recess, and you, the viewer, for attending. Bryan, where can people find you to connect?
Oh yeah, I'm Clark BW in most places, so like Twitter slash Clark BW. So that's probably the easiest thing for connecting. Also LinkedIn. Yeah, I'm all in on LinkedIn now, I guess.
Okay, awesome. We will be posting this recording and a summary with time codes on Medium, so look forward to that. Our next recess session will be on July 21st, and we look forward to having you join us again. Thanks again for dropping by, everyone. Have a great week. Thank you, Bryan.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Liz.